So hello everybody and welcome to the 11th episode of our Tandem Talks. So for those of you that are new to our Tandem is a progressive continuous performance management platform. And this is our thought leadership content webinar series, where we invite thought leaders, business leaders and HR leaders to join us and share their expertise and their insights. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Kevin Empey. Kevin, as many of you will know, is the Managing Director of Work Matters, the international future of work consultancy, and is the author of the book, Thrive in the Future of Work. And I know we're going to hear many themes from the book today. Kevin will be joining us to speak to the CEO of our Tandem, Aisling Tayar, about the emergence of a new employment deal. We'd love this to be interactive, so please feel free to comment your questions in the chat box below, and there will be lots of time for us to come around to them. And the final thing from me is that this session is being recorded. So I hope you enjoy the session. I know it's going to be great, and I'd like to hand over to Aisling. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome to Tandem Talks. We're so thrilled to be joined by Kevin, one of my favorite thought leaders in the industry, and I literally devoured his book in a night sitting. It's so engaging, so brilliant. So I can't wait to share more of the insights from that throughout today. Really excited to be talking about the new employee deal. I think it moves the conversation on for us in HR to think about the whole construct. So welcome, Kevin. We're delighted you're here, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It would be nice to be seeing you, more of you, than in the virtual world, but hey, we're getting used to that, I guess. And let me just perhaps share screen. Is that okay? Coming through okay, loud and clear? Yeah, so look, thrilled to join you today on, as Aisling says, this probably emerging topic, I think, with talk of great resignations and everything else. Certainly, potentially, we're beginning to turn our attention perhaps to the issues beyond COVID, beyond hybrid, etc., and what's going on in the broader world of work. So that's what I'm here and been asked to come along and to chat to you about. And just to say thank you and congratulations to Tandem for their 11th episode of this. I think it's been a fantastic series to keep us in touch with things as they've progressed over these last almost 2 years of change that we've seen in to work and working life. As been mentioned, yes, Managing Director of Work Matters. I guess I've been in the people and leadership space for about 30 years now, but the last 10 years particularly focused on this future of work topic, or this changing world of work, and really interested in the practical implications for us as individuals, as organizations, for HR, for leaders. So I'm very much a future of work pragmatist, I think, rather than a futurist. And I guess this topic today is something close to my heart too. Having set up Work Matters in 2017, and previous years of working closely on the emergence of the employment deal, going from rewards to total rewards to employee engagement, employee experience. You know, we've all seen the progress over the years. So I'm really interested to talk to you today about, well, what's the new context for the employment relationship in this thing we call the future of work, and particularly as we plot and plan our way for the post-COVID world that we are now in, or getting towards, I hope, at least in terms of workforce planning and planning our workforces and return to offices, etc. So that's the kind of broader context. I guess just before we get into employee deal stuff, it's probably just worth reminding ourselves there was a future of work before COVID, and there's going to be one after it. And there are other things at play. And I just thought this, there's so much written on this topic, isn't there? Where, there's no shortage of words and reports and surveys. But this interesting one from Harvard that really picked up in 2019, the fact of these forces that were all converging. And that's the interesting thing about, I think, the era we're all living in now. There's a convergence of digital, 5 generations at work, demographic shifts, new attitudes to work, talent, workforce fragmentation, so much going on. But really, maybe you could argue, unless you're at the sharp end of automation and workforce change, the future of work hadn't quite landed as a practical reality for a lot of folks, exemplified here by this phrase from the report that executives believe something of genuine importance is emerging in the world of work, but don't quite know what to make of it. And I suppose the contention I have is that, COVID has probably helped to crystallize or to give us all individually and from HR and from leadership perspective, a chance to actually step back and reflect, where are we now in the evolution of work? And more importantly, how do we shape both the next phase and the phase to come? What do we do in practical ways in order to move ourselves forward? Or do we go back to the way things were? Question mark for today. I guess in talking to leaders, and this is coming from discussions, workshops, training, research all over the world at this stage, about saying, well, when you think of future of work, what are the practical realities? What are the things we're solving for? There is no working definition really of future of work, or common definition, should I say. It's been a label of convenience that's been used now for so many years. But these things, I won't go through them all. I think you recognize them all, but these are the top 5 or 6 that always come through when you ask people to really focus on the reality, the practical reality of what's going on from an organizational perspective. And this mixture, and in fact, when you look at these things, it brings to mind, for me anyway, a working definition for future of work, which is like the fusion of business adaptability and its impact on work, the fusion of business adaptability, internal organizational agility, the internal perspective, and the changing nature of work in the workplace. So that fusion of business adaptability, organizational agility, and the changing nature of work and workplace, I think that gives us at least something to work on in terms of what we're solving for, what we're planning for. And certainly with COVID, these last 3 are certainly playing a part now, aren't they, in terms of front of mind for us as we kind of plot our way forward. And I think one of the things also I noticed, whereas we were probably at different places in this future of work journey around the world, that we all are in this quite common place in the history of work now, where we're all maybe thinking broadly around the same agenda of moving from our past ways of working, pre-COVID, if you like, into something for the future. And there's this messy bit in the middle, right, in terms of the transition phase of what we're going through. And there's 3 sort of perspectives or horizons that come to mind for me on this. And one is the short term, which is safe return to office type activity, which I think we're all familiar with. And we've been just talking about it before the call here, about safety in the workplace and in conferences and all that kind of thing. So that short term issue with COVID still present. The second, more medium term, is transition to hybrid, which this probably represents, is given the majority of employers at least moving or shifting towards some form of hybrid. What does that look like and how are we going to get there? And that's a medium term thing. But I think what I'm trying to say here, before we get into the employment deal stuff, is that there's this longer term agenda at play too, about how we are maybe using this next medium term phase, this transition to hybrid, to position ourselves not just for successful hybrid transition, but also use that as an opportunity, as a bridge, if you like, to set ourselves up for further change and evolution of work as it comes, inevitably comes down the line at us. You could argue that hybrid is having one question about work really at the front of mind, which is the where of work today, where we're going to do our best work. What work do we need to get done, and how and where are we going to do it is the sort of question of the day at the moment. But there's a lot more going on in terms of work, automation, the what of work, the how of work, the when of work, the who of work. Those things are going to play out. And us as HR, change agents, the architects, if you like, of the future of work, might just bear that in mind as we're planning our hybrid transitions, is that we're also setting the platform, the foundation for a longer term story as well. And look, this a bit busy slide, and again, we're seeing this stuff coming at us online and elsewhere all the time about this shift as being ongoing to work and working life, and it's not new. Hasn't just started with COVID. COVID has probably given us the focus at the moment and the current context for this unfolding story. But the fragmentation, for instance, of work from an employer point of view in the modern era has been going on. Go back to industrial age if we have time. But in the modern era, even sort of in the 1990s, you started to see the fragmentation regarding contracting and outsourcing, the Nikeification of work, as it's been called. We refer to it in the book, where the organization was no longer a single entity, but it was actually an ecosystem of partners and suppliers and contractors. That was really starting to affect work and careers and jobs. And of course, from an employee perspective too, there's a shifting fragmentation as well. And that's kind of blended in the noughties too, when you have, if you like, the Uberization of work, which has brought together gig working and agent working and all of that, sort of bringing together the way work is changing, but also the way in which employees find and seek and deliver work. A lot's been going on in the world of work. And I think the millennial generation has probably done most to voice their concerns, their hopes, their dreams about work, where they are, the issues with work, calling out some of the realities of the, if you like, 20th century model of work that we've had. Hang on, we're living in very much the 21st century. We're living and leading and working. So we want to call out some things that we'd like to see, as this Jacob Morgan piece on the right sort of illustrates. So there's something going on. And of course, to modern day headlines too, of course, we're faced with a lot of talk about the Great Resignation and what's going on there. And, a lot of discussion, 40% leaving the jobs. Are they not? Is it really happening? Do we see it as evidence? I think there's something very much real. It's at least you can say there's an unsettled workforce out there in their transition from, if you like, pre-COVID and COVID experience to the post-COVID world of work. This is, really at play. And what I would certainly call it, whatever about resignation, I'd say the great expectation, because there's this huge expectation, I think, amongst employees now for greater flexibility, greater autonomy, and a new world of work to come. So the question is, though, what do you think? I certainly think that there's enough evidence, both pre-COVID and since, to suggest at least that a new employment deal is in the making, is in the air. But what do you think? What's your lived reality on this? I'd love to just have a quick poll to see what people think on this topic as to where they are on this question of the employee deal. Is it real, or is it only an incremental really evolution? So the questions here you've been asked to vote on. Do you think that there's a significant shift in the post-COVID world in terms of the employee deal, which we'll talk about? Or do you think we're just seeing an incremental natural evolution with a bit of flexibility maybe, but really not much has changed? Or do you see no change at all? Do you think actually this is all, a bit of a blip, and in fact the pre-COVID arrangements will apply? So, or none of the above? So share with us what you think. Thanks, Megan. I think you launched that, have you? So interesting, 60-40, yeah, incremental. We should talk about that, Aisling, in a while. And but certainly interesting to see, is this the tipping point of something bigger, or actually is this just an evolution that we've got to manage our way through? And that is the topic. One of the chapters that Aisling's mentioned in his book, we explored this to sort of understand: is there a reset, given not just our COVID and our hybrid and the demand for flexibility, but also these other forces that were ongoing anyway. There was a lot of stress in the system. All was not perfect with the world of work before COVID. People were talking about always on, stress, burnout, commuting, concentration of work in the cities, all of these things, dependence, children, a lot of issues were emerging. And we sort of explored, well, what would this be? Are we looking at some kind of shift, and what that shift might be? So just open it up to what it might look like. And this isn't just opinion here. This is based on some of the research and practice. The likes of Rosabeth Moss-Cantor has been talking about this idea of renewable commitment for 20 years, this idea of a more adult-to-adult relationship. We saw after the last crisis that employees were saying, look, I know I can't rely on my employer for long term. security regarding my pay and regarding my career. I get it now because you fired me. So look, loyalty goes both ways. So, but what I do want from you as an employer is the opportunity to grow while I'm with you, and that you spend some time on helping me future-proof my career with skills development, etc. Flexibility is the third last point there. Moving from a more fixed 20th century model of work to a more flexible model of work. Yes, that is one and a very present issue. But is it one of other shifts that are going on? And as we shape the post-COVID world, would we bear in mind other things going on so that we can attend to them? A more authentic, if you like, or honest, if you like, view or exchange with people as we move forward. AT&T is an example here. And again, this is going back probably 2016, 2017 now. And you can see it, it's in a Harvard Business Review report. I think it's called Talent Overhaul. We'll put it in the chat later. Where they talked about their shift from an analog, if you like, employment relationship to a more digital employment relationship, 250,000 people, and shifting them from one world to the other. And how they needed to do that it wasn't a typical change management process where they let go thousands of people and took on others. They went through a huge reskilling and re-engagement agenda to bring people along, but also to get people to take responsibility for their own careers, their own responsibilities as well. So a very interesting case studies, and there's more in the book talking about this idea of a fresh and a reset, if you like, of the relationship. And reverting to some basics. This is kind of a very basic model, but I think that's kind of part of the answer that a lot of people talk about, is going back to basics. We've probably been tinkering around with things, with free canteens and foosball tables and games and all the rest of it. When we really strip back the core, what is our offer? What is the contractual piece, for instance? What is the more workforce employee experience? And the purpose piece, the more emotional bit. And I think this is not a bad model, adapted from Mercer, but others and Towers and others doing this as well. Just talking about some kind of framework to think and reset, if you like, the employee deal that's in front of us. Some things we talk about on the contractual side, compensation benefits, you might say maybe not much going on there, but actually there's some amazing cases from the likes of Visi and Burzog, two companies in Europe who done amazing things just to kind of really turn around what the kind of assumptions around what a compensation and benefits package might look like. If we don't have the freedom, because we're in a big multinational and we have sort of older systems, perhaps then the opportunity is more in the delivery of that compensation and benefits, more individualized rewards, etc. But you've got things going on in that agenda and that bottom compensation benefits too, about responsible pay, ethical pay and reward. You've got, the gender pay gap. You've got social rewards and social conscience coming on as well. The likes of Dan Schulman, the CEO of PayPal, talking about not just minimum wage or living wage, but net disposable income, working out, region to region, what would be a reasonable package, and being able for people to take money off the table so they can live and then engage with the company. So very different thinking going on, both in corporate world, but also startup world, about what the compensation and benefits of the 21st century should look like. I think it's purpose at the other end. I think we've all heard about this, and we know people are looking for purpose and meaning in their work. But the question is, how are we baking that into our deal? How are we helping people with that? And that's not just about projecting the employer's purpose. I think people can see through that, and it's either authentic and real or it's not. But it's about the effort made to help people connect with their own purpose in the jobs and the work that they do and in the company that they're in. What's going on there? And I think that's really important for this next phase, because I think we are going through, in the post-COVID hybrid, where there's quite an emotional phase of people returning to work. Don't underestimate the emotional piece around that, not just a logistical and healthcare one. It's one of connection, isn't it? And how are we helping our leaders to help employees to connect with their work, connect with their colleagues, to connect with the company? So there's more than meets the eye in this. It's a simple kind of model, but it's an interesting framework to rethink or at least confirm that our employee deal is as good as it can be. Because the middle section is really where there's so much to play for now, where we can differentiate ourselves to our competition regarding the employee experience, well-being, which would include, flexibility and so on, is about, and careers and skills for the future. That actually working here is just going to be better than it is somewhere else. And it's going to be better maybe than if you're just working remotely as well, that we've got a mixture and a blend and staying with us. So I don't know. I think, and I think, Aisling, we've talked as well too about, Accenture talk about this concept of net better off. In other words, benefits may not be as good as somebody, the compensation mightn't be as good, but actually when you put this story together of what it is to work with this organization, you are net better off than elsewhere. And you're also going to be net better off in a year than you were last year because of this blend of issues and offerings that will appeal to you at a particular time. We'll come back to this one perhaps in our discussion. And then again, for HR, I think, and I know some of you already doing this already, but I just, when I talk to folks about the future of HR, what we're doing, how we're organizing ourselves, what we do, there is this wonderful opportunity now to bring in skill sets like design thinking and journey mapping and agile principles to really, I suppose, enhance what we're doing to architect and also deliver on the employee experience. Thinking about these points of differentiation, as they're called, where we have got a high point in the employee journey, how can we make it higher? Where we have a lower point, that's not good, how can we improve on it? Taking some of these principles and really thinking about that middle layer of the employee experience. And a couple of final remarks would be that it could be in the delivery of all of these things that are changing now, and particularly as we face into hybrid, the idea of technology being a common platform of experience that people are going to have. How do we improve that against all of these kind of changing attributes? How do we maximize technology? A HR director said to me only last week that they said, look, when it comes to the employee experience and the hybrid existence, we have to admit that probably pre-COVID, we were on a slow bicycle race, as he called it, in terms of digital. But now they're going to have to put on turbo boosters to really use technology to connect with people, to help them collaborate, but also to give them that individual experience at work as well, whether they're in the office or whether they're not. I think a final enablement piece I see coming through a lot now is this idea of bringing our managers with us. So how are we delivering this with and through our managers? And we know at the moment there's a huge concentration on enablement for their managing the hybrid and the post-COVID kind of world of work. And these are the type of topics that certainly we see in our training as being popular areas of support to managers in leading and managing the next phase. But you see there one at the bottom, and it's not in order of priority, but reframing the employee deal has crept into one of the areas of support and training that managers are going to need to connect with employees on this issue of where are you now post-COVID? Where are you in this organization? How do we connect? Where's your growth? Where's your skill needs, etc. So that managers are aware too of the emerging employee deal and what needs to shift and change, rather than having them in a mindset that's probably pre-COVID and pretending that it's going to be the same as it was before. So I think there's some interesting work going on too, not just on the technology stuff, but on using managers as well to transmit, to communicate, to storytell around this next phase of work. So my contention is anyway that I think rather than just being at another little stage of the future of work, I think we're at a significant inflection point. I think it's a choice now whether we take that opportunity to not just deal with the short-term return to office or the medium-term hybrid, but also set in place a platform or foundation for the longer-term future of work challenge to develop the capability, the skills and the habits And I think the new employee deal is part of that story. And I think it is going to shift and change. And the question is what we're doing proactively, I suppose, on that, both through technology and through managers. Finally, I just think it's a nice analogy. The kintsugi, the art of kintsugi, an ancient Japanese art going back a long, long time, where pots and urns of the great houses of the Japanese empire would have been adorning those rooms. And when they broke because there was no way you just fix up a pot and put it back into a royal household. Until somebody saw the pile of the wastage that was going on, very environmentally aware even in those days, and said, what if we put together that pot or urn, but do it with precious metal, with gold, with aluminum, with other precious silver, in order to make the reformed, if you like, object better, stronger, and more beautiful than it actually was in its original form. And I just kind of feel that we're going through now a disruption and a tricky time in the employment deal. Stresses and strains post-COVID, flexibility, great resignation, all these kind of things going on. But actually, I think we have an opportunity to create something out of that storm damage, if you like, and take the best of what was there before, plus acknowledge what's changing and has been changing for some time, and to put that into some kind of proposition and story that'll make our employment proposition better than it ever has been. So, Aisling, love to debate all or some of the above with you, and be very interested in any challenges or examples that people might want to share through the chat.
Oh, fantastic. That's so thought-provoking, Kevin. Thank you so much for those insights. And my love for this session is shared by Kathy, who's saying, excellent, great session. And indeed, Marilyn, who loves your analogy of the pot. Thank you to those people who are putting in comments. We're going to try and raise your comments and your questions in the next section, because this is very much your event, a community event. So please put your questions or comments into the Q&A, preferably, so we can aggregate everything there. And of course, everybody else can see your comments there too. But one from Frances here saying that she loves the new deal. It's what employee experience shall be about for a long time already. And it's way more human-centric and empathetic, helping people along the rapid changes and the mental, psychological component. Curious to learn how you set and train those traits and skills with people, managers, and future leaders. So I'll put that one to you first, Kevin, before we get into our discussion, just to see if you have any thoughts on that.
It kind of brings me back to this point that one of the things we're seeing in as you know, getting manager attention on training and development and helping them with the people side of their work is always a challenge, because they've so much else going on, right? But one of the things I think we're seeing is there will be and is a demand for support and help in how do I lead my team in this next phase? Give me clarity, give me support, give me some of the tools, and to be able to have one-to-one conversations and hybrid ways of working and such here. And the reason why I think this is relevant is that to use this training phase and development phase, that'll probably last for another year, I'd say, in terms of we're not going to stuff managers with this information in a week or a month, but as well as helping them solve for the short-term transition to hybrid, bring in talk of how we do that in a culture-sensitive way, in a values-sensitive way, in an employment deal-sensitive way. In other words, that it's not just about solving for a technical kind of transition to how to handle hybrid team meetings, but we're actually opening their minds to the broader battle, if you like, at play, the battle for hearts and minds, and connecting them to purpose, getting people to see the opportunities in the next phase as they change, helping them deal with that change and complexity. So I suppose it's an underpinning. That's one suggestion, at least, is that we underpin, if you like, the next training phase with some of these bigger items, so that by the end, when we look back at our investment in that training over the next year, we have built habits and behaviors amongst our leaders that are that will work and have value way beyond the transition of hybrid. that's certainly one way I'd be suggesting it, Aisling.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think that this is such a moment to drive and accelerate that change into the future of work. And I love the word you use, that HR are here to architect that deal. And I remember David Ulrich saying something similar. He sees HR now as architects of the future. And I think we have a unique position that we have a license to be the architect as well. I think maybe pre-COVID, people didn't always recognize the people agenda as the priority item, but I think it's center stage right now. So we nearly have to grab it, don't we, and turn this crisis into HR's opportunity to drive forward on the things that we probably always wanted to address, but maybe didn't have the license or the level of urgency that we have now to address it. So I think it's a great time to be in HR.
I agree, Aisling. I think in all my sort of pre-COVID, future of work, I found one of the challenges that HR had was getting attention on this topic. In other words, because we've got this quarter to do, we've got this year's training plan, we've got this strategy to deliver. Future of work, that comment at the very beginning, leaders knew there was something, but they weren't too sure what it was. Whereas I think we have a moment now. We have a moment when we've got the employees' attention, we've got managers' attention, we've got leaders' attention. And to grab that with both hands and not just try to architect for what will be a successful transition to the next phase of work, but to use that opportunity to build a foundation also for further change, which is inevitable.
Yeah, so I see you and me here are getting excited about what HR can do, but Kathy makes the very valid point that the past 20 months has been extremely demanding, disruptive, and at times difficult for the HR community with no change in sight. So what advice would you have for passionate but exhausted HR professionals to stay upbeat?
It is, isn't it? And I think we were talking earlier too about this great resignation piece and whether that was, when people say 40% are going to leave, are they leaving, or are they threatening to leave, or are they thinking about leaving, or are they following through? And you were sharing a story that the HR profession is finding this a challenge too, for the very reasons you've just described, isn't it? In terms of retention and attraction of ourselves.
Yeah, I see a lot of burnout happening in HR after what they've been through. Yeah, it's really a genuine issue.
One of the things I think HR need to do, and I think we've got the business case now to say, look, we have done what we've done over the last 2 years in terms of keeping this organization safe and doing what we've done. In order to really help the organization move forward, we're going to need some support types. So we're going to have to think about how we're structured. In other words, are we doing the day job and the future of work stuff at the same time? Are we the same person managing for return to office as the future of work type OD and OE type areas? If so, there's something wrong in terms of even how we're structured and resourced and set up for success. So I fully empathize with that point. Is if we're expecting to create the future of work on the run, on the basis of just working harder and faster, then I don't think that's sustainable. And so that's one point, is in HR's own resource. But the other one then is to see, a bit like that manager enablement piece, is how can we spread the load? How can we create a culture of shared accountability for this, rather than HR feeling that it's on them, And that's why I was thinking about that smart use of manager enablement, which is going to happen. Use that as a Trojan horse for other things that you might want to do. But I think we need air cover on this. We need leadership, air cover and resourcing and license and budget to do this. It's a business change.
Think so. It's time to be more demanding of budgets and resources, and we see it with our people who've come on the platform. We've grown hugely this year because HR are going back to the business going, we need to put tools in managers' hands that help them manage for this dispersed, different world that we live in. We can't live with the old tools, so we need budgets to do new things. And they're getting it. The CEOs, I think, are coming around and they're seeing that, we can't keep working the way we used to work. So I think it is time to be demanding of our business to go, this is what we need to help you as a business run more effectively.
And the
So
business case, actually, just to finish on that, I think we can create a very, I've done this template where we've got a business case or a scorecard to say, here's the hard costs associated with this change. Here's the soft costs, but here's the hard benefits, and here's the soft benefits.
nice.
The cost
Yeah.
of not doing, actually getting into business case. And we say, even if you take 10% attrition there, and you can start to convert that into sort of real dollars and really understand, well, what's the cost of not doing this in the right way?
Exactly. Okay, so I think we have a second poll, if I'm not wrong. I don't know if Gabby wants to launch our second poll to hear more from our audience. So on this one, we're asking, which are the areas that you see yourself prioritizing in this new employee deal? Now, we figured that you're probably working on everything all simultaneously, but we'd love you to pick the top 3 that you think you're going to prioritize over the coming months, year, in the foreseeable future. So lots going on there. Changing stats by the minute. This is super interesting.
Like a horse race, is it there?
It's like a horse race. Who's coming in high here? What's interesting, I think, about this is that some of those areas are actually overlapping, because if you change the nature of your performance management, chances are you're going to change talent management, and chances are that feeds into how you're growing and developing people and indeed leadership capability. So arguably, if you're working on one, you're by almost implication working on several others at the same time too. But I think we've come to conclusion that leadership capability is huge, because it looks like just under 80% seem to be really going after that, and nearly 50% after growth and development, 62% well-being. So well-being still very top of people's minds. And a nice kind of even spread amongst the others. And if you want to share the other things that you're working on, maybe in the chat, we'd love to hear about which categories of work that you think is relevant too.
I think that leadership development piece is such an interesting one too, because you mentioned HR being exhausted and tired. I think we have to also think about, how do we serve our leaders and people managers on this journey too, given everything else going on regarding, transition from a business perspective into the next phase as well. And I think even one of the things we need to start thinking about is succession planning, and even, not just helping those leaders that are in situ, but actually what are the qualities we now need for leaders and managers in the future? Are they the same? Perhaps they are, but I certainly see in my work regarding future of work enablement, focus on leadership agility, servant leadership, these kind of qualities that creating so that they're able to create a psychologically safe and high performing team, and share that accountability with the team rather than command and control type of behaviors. So I think if ever there was a time when we could hopefully maybe finally cross that line that I think we've been crossing for some time anyway. But in terms of new managers and new leaders, I think there's a huge opportunity for them to first just to rethink what those skill sets are now that we want for them to do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've seen over the past year in particular is a real re-emphasis on how people lead, and not just putting the right tools in their hands in terms of, we can use Tandem technology because obviously they're onboarding on Tandem, but really thinking deeply about the conversations they want to trigger with it. So like in your one-to-ones, triggering, these are the discussion areas to cover. Here's some coaching tips to help you. Here's, so really feeding, I suppose, in bite-sized format, this new level of leadership capability so that people can go in confidently, because we know that people aren't born servant leaders. We know that's a journey to get them on, but actually HR are getting much, much more prescriptive about going, here's some ways we can help you move to that style of leadership, to be that great coach. And it's really proven effective. People are lapping it up, because I guess you go on a training course, you forget half of it, but it's sitting there in your technology. Here's the agenda for your conversation. Here's the things, it really helps bring it to life and make it very real.
There's a couple of points as well related
Yeah.
to that from Martin Pablo about the culture piece and indeed
Yeah.
the organic nature of all of this. So I think it's a great point. And in certainly in one of the training modules we have is interesting because it says, right, how do we manage this change with a heightened awareness of the culture and values that we're trying to create? So in other words, it's not just about the logistical skill, it's about how we lead this and how we engage, and that inclusive piece. I think that's a very interesting one. And what I found with these manager kind of sessions now is that we're surfacing in a very real way what culture actually is, what values are, what a performance discussion really looks like. I think in a way, because it has to be sort of reinvented for the hybrid sort of world anyway, it's creating a new opportunity to refresh those items and to surface them and to explore them. And I think that's a great point. So again, it's about using this opportunity to remind people and to surface this stuff. And the other thing I think is the use of employees themselves. As people come back, having advocates and champions who are storytelling and sharing their stories about how good it is, how inclusive it is. I think employees themselves will create this story, as well as depending on it coming from leaders and managers and HR.
Yeah, keen to get in some audience comments here. So Teresa's also focused on HRIS implementation, which is a huge enabler to transfer that accountability back into managers. Mart is talking about company culture first. All the other areas are part of it, for sure. What you just said there, Kevin, what is our company culture? And then you can focus on what leadership capability is needed to drive it. And Pablo talks about inclusion, belonging, and company culture. It has to grow organically. So lots of really interesting takes on it. There's one piece in your book that really stood out to me, Kevin, when you were talking about this. And, you mentioned it in the speech, that concept of net better off, and the idea that maybe, and you didn't put it this brutally in your book, but it's certainly an implication that maybe nobody really owes anybody loyalty anymore, or maybe we don't have a right to expect people to stay for 10 years or those sorts of periods of time. But while people are with us, we have a commitment to maybe helping them be net better off as a result of working with our company. And that's what will attract and retain the right level of caliber of professional to us. And I love that concept because I think there's so much in it, isn't there, of the idea that we have to work harder at growing and developing people, whether it's via training, whether it's about evolving their skills, whether it's about making sure we're spending time with them, discussing the growth, the development, their career. So the non-selfish, we're not training you so you get better at the job, but we're training you to be a better professional so that you can take your skills and capabilities anywhere, whether it's with us or elsewhere. I love that concept.
I think that's one of these shifts that we're seeing, is that the training and development and growth and commitment has been for you within the job and role that you have, and we hope you'll stay with us, etc. But I think that that, as I said, that renewable commitment idea in the employee deal is an interesting one, where while you're with us, let's have that adult to adult conversation. That life things change, and they change for the employer as well. Loyalty goes both ways, doesn't it? And I think employers, unfortunately or unfortunately, it's been a natural evolution, have shown that when things get tough, labor is always on the wrong side of the equation, right? So we cut. And as I said, that feedback from those employees after the last recession was, I get it now. I get it that I can't rely on my employer for long-term security, both financial and career-wise. So what employers may be turning that around to acknowledge that reality, but say, while you're here, we won't just train you for your job. We're going to train you in other areas that are going to future-proof your career, either with us or outside. And I think just to acknowledge what you're saying, Aisling, but I think the other difference is challenging the employee as well to say, this is a partnership. You've got to step up here too. And you have to take responsibility for your career and your success here and elsewhere. And we'll provide the ecosystem, but we're not going to spoon feed you either.
Yeah, that ownership of the employee to drive their own growth and development is so key. And I see it on so many more people's agendas right now. But I see Meg has joined us, which is usually a signal that we need to come to an end.
It is, sorry, but that was such a great discussion. So thank you, Kevin, for joining us again, and for Aisling to moderate so brilliantly. And thank you always to the audience for joining us. Such great participation. We have got fantastic guest speakers lined up for next year. So please feel free to follow us on our Tandem at LinkedIn. And also I've put Kevin's link so you can connect directly with Kevin. We'll be sending the recording after the session, and Kevin very kindly has given us 25% discount codes for his book, Thrive in the Future of Work. So we'll be sure to send those to you as well. They expire at the end of November, so it's go, go, go. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.